Well, today I'm back with another curated selection of Sézane-style knitting patterns. We don't have any specific dupes this time, it's just vibes, but the vibes are, of course, French girl summer, elegant, effortlessly chic, ethereal, a little bit trendy, but still with a vintage touch. I really hope that this list will inspire you and help you cast on your future favorite knit. I'm gonna cover tops, sleeveless tops, and cardigans, so it's gonna be great for warm weather and transitional weather knits. Before we begin, please consider subscribing so you don't miss my future videos, and let's start. Because the style and the vibes we're going for tend to include a lot of lacy and intricate knits, I try to make sure that every pattern I select has really good feedback from people who knit it, because I want you to be in good hands and enjoy the process just as much as you would enjoy the finished object eventually. And I know that my audience ranges from absolute beginners to people who are much more experienced at knitting than me, and even though I consider myself to be an experienced knitter, I always strive to learn new techniques and challenge myself and get better at knitting. And what has been helping me immensely with this, especially when it comes to lace knitting, is the sponsor of today's video, Craftsy. Craftsy is an amazing online resource for creatives of all skill levels and interests. They offer over 2,000 classes in more than 20 different categories, including, of course, knitting, sewing, embroidery, woodworking, crochet, and so much more. I have been a huge fan of Craftsy, and the class I've been loving the most so far is a class by Nancy Bush called Estonian Lace Explained. I'm just so glad that this class exists, because thanks to this class, I'm this close to finally casting on my ultimate dream knit, a full Estonian lace shawl. I even made this little swatch, which I think is one of the most elaborate swatches I've ever done, and looking at it makes me so excited to see what the finished scarf will look like, and I can't wait to share more about it as I knit it. With Craftsy, you'll never run out of things to try, because they're always adding new classes to keep you coming back for more, and every class is taught by a passionate and approachable professional who provides you with detailed video instructions and downloadable content as well to help you learn. It's also a great place for you if you're looking to try out a new hobby and stay inspired. So if you want to join Craftsy, you can do so by following the link in the description, because the first 1,000 of you to click the link will get a full year of Craftsy Premium membership for just $1.49. And this will, of course, include access to thousands of Craftsy classes for a full year, but it is valid for new members only. So make sure to check out the link in the description to improve your crafting skills and stay inspired. And thank you so much, Craftsy, for sponsoring today's video. So we'll start off our list with the Maybe Lily Tank, which is a pattern by Camille K, and it's a beautiful design which I really wanted to include last time. It's a lightweight V-neck camisole knit in all-over lace pattern, and it has I-cord finishings, so the straps are worked in an I-cord, as well as the center front opening and the finishings around the armholes. It also has these little crochet loops that serve as your buttonholes. It's worked bottom up in one piece, so you do have to commit to the length, and the intended fit and the length in the pattern is cropped, so good for like high-waisted pants and skirts. If you want the top to be longer, you can add an extra lace repeat when you start, but since the repeat is quite wide, I would honestly recommend maybe splitting the hem so it doesn't like bunch up at your hips. The ease for this top ranges from 7 centimeters of negative ease to about 2 of positive ease, so it depends on which fit you're going for, and it isn't really bra friendly. It does have a really open, like eyelet heavy lace motif. I think if you go up a size, you can actually use it as a really interesting layering option, so on top of blouses or shirts. And also the choice of buttons you use can really change this top from a more kind of trendy piece to something more vintage inspired and romantic. For example, if you use pearl buttons, I would honestly, if I were to knit this, I would use crochet buttons to kind of match the crochet loops as buttonholes. This top is intended to be knit on 3.5mm needles, and it asks for sport weight yarn with plenty of different yarn suggestions. And one of them I can see is Sandnes Garn, which, since I can't stop yapping about it, is one of my favorite go-to summer yarns. It looks great with lace and like eyelet designs. It's really drapey, so I think it'll work great with this top. Another kind of beloved summer option is pure silk, which you can hold double for this. I really like the textured noops, which are kind of the main focus of the lace motif. And if you're feeling adventurous, you can actually knit them in contrasting yarn. But I already feel sorry for the amount of like floats you will need to carry and ends you will need to weave in. But maybe have fun with that if you want to. So next on our list is the Barbroe top, which is sort of a cousin of the Barbroe blouse I mentioned in my last Sézane video, and it's knit in the same feathered lace stitch, and the gauge as well as the needle size suggested is also the same. It has a fairly high rounded neckline and also wider straps, so it's pretty bra friendly. The top has plenty of negative ease, which makes it really form-fitting, and I think it'll look stunning on every body shape. You do have to be careful with the length because the recommended pure silk from Knitting for Olive tends to really grow after blocking. So my recommendation is to make a gauge swatch, which is kind of my usual recommendation. I'm a big proponent of always gauge swatching, but in this case I would recommend you do a big or like generous gauge swatch and hang it to dry instead of just like laying it flat. I would use something like a clasp hanger for pants, you know, with this like really firm clasp, so you can hang it overnight, for example, and get a better idea of how the yarn is stretching, so you can then customize your length accordingly. And the pattern repeat is not as wide, for example, as the one in the maybe Lily tank, so it's easier to again customize it and add more or less repeats depending on the length you want to achieve. It's knit on 3mm needles, so not necessarily a quick knit, but still the lace repeat is pretty easy to memorize. It's super intuitive and engaging. I think after a while you won't even notice the difference between knitting something like this and something knit in stockinette. I think it'll look beautiful in pretty much every color, but I would avoid something super variegated or speckled as to just not wash out and distract from the lace motif. Another beautiful design by Camille K is her Strawberry Fields top. It's knit in wide vertical stripes that alternate stockinette and a really beautiful braided lace motif. To me, this top looks really vintage inspired and super summery, but because this lace motif doesn't have any eyelets and it's pretty opaque overall, it's not too busy, and this piece is pretty versatile, so you can definitely dress it up or down. The top is also really lightweight. It's also intended for 3mm needles, and the recommended yarn is a fingering weight yarn, something like Tynn or again pure silk by Knitting for Olive. The top has sections of twisted ribbing both at the neckline and at the hem, and your straps are also worked in twisted ribbing. You knit it top down with straps attached later. The pattern actually recommends you kind of take a pause in knitting the body and attach the straps at some point to be able to try on the top and like customize your length. But it starts with a tubular cast on for the twisted ribbing here at the neckline, and I would honestly skip it because a lot of people have issues with their tubular cast on being like too loose and too floaty. So if you're not sure about your tubular cast on and don't have like the muscle memory to make it super neat, I would suggest to just skip it and do a long tail cast on or a knit cast on instead. Just don't make it too tight. The fit of this top includes about 5 to 15 centimeters of negative ease, but I would go maybe for 5 at most to keep the top really drapey and flowy. And I'm not really sure why it's called Strawberry Fields, because it doesn't remind me of like strawberries at all. It really reminds me of French pastry, especially like puff pastry that is kind of braided, so not really sure. Next we have the Concha top by LorienKnits, and it's another beautiful vintage inspired design. It's pretty simple and sleek, but it has a beautiful crochet scalloped edge around the neckline and around the armholes. The top is knit bottom up with the straps knit at the very end, and you start knitting it at the hem with a couple of rounds of garter stitch, but some knitters who made this pattern reported that even with this garter border at the hem still rolls up and like curls up after blocking. So I would suggest you do ribbing instead, or maybe add the same scalloped crochet edge as on the neckline and on the armholes. And if you're new to crochet, you still don't have to worry because the pattern has video instructions on how to do the scalloped edge, and it actually is pretty simple. The top is knit on 4mm needles, and the crochet border is done on 3mm hook. The yarn weight on the pattern page is displayed as worsted, but I'm pretty sure it's not. It's more like DK or sport weight, and again, some knitters who knit this pattern tried to use worsted weight yarn, but it ended up being way too heavy. So I think you can try and use, for example, Lina for this pattern, or Drops Bell, which is a dupe for Lina, or maybe use some plant-based fingering yarns held together and just play around with gauge. Another yarn option I can suggest is Duo by Sandnes Garn, but if your tension tends to be really tight and you find yourself like going up a size to achieve gauge on most patterns, maybe skip duo because the fabric might just end up being way too dense and kind of heavy for this sort of top. And I don't see any information about the ease on the Ravelry page, but just looking at the pattern pictures and the projects of people who made this top, I would say it's about 5 to 10 centimeters. But again, you can adjust the sizing and just look at the gauge and your measurements. And I really like the bottle green color used in the pattern sample. I haven't used this color in a while, so looking at this pattern really reminded me of how beautiful and chic this sort of green looks. And I have one more top for you, which I think is really stunning. It's called the Yasmeen top, and it's by Zanete Knits. This is a much more elaborate piece compared to the previous ones, and it's knit in this really eyelet heavy all over lace motif with a peplum and also beautiful picot edges everywhere. It has an opening at the center front. It's a beautiful detail heavy design. Naturally, this design is not really bra friendly because of the open lace and the center front opening, unless you're wearing skin tone colored underwear, or you can wear a contrasting crop top or maybe wear it as a vest on a blouse or a shirt. The Yasmeen top is quite long and the peplum it has makes it even longer, so if you want a more cropped or shorter fit in general, you can skip the peplum and skip a few lace repeats. Instead, you can use the same picot edge on the hem as you would knit on the rest of the body. The peplum itself is knit in twisted ribbing, and at the beginning of the peplum you have these beautiful eyelets, so it's a really subtle lace motif there. It's a lot of work, and this pattern in general has a lot of details and just really thoughtful touches. The ties at the center front are actually finger cords. It is pretty simple, but if you don't want to do it, you can do crochet chains instead. I don't think an I-cord would work here though, because it might be too bulky compared to the rest of the top. And this top is knit top down, so you start with the back of the shoulders and it's shaped with increases on every row until you reach the necessary trapezoid shape. The pattern recommends fingering or sport weight yarn, with the main yarn suggestion being Cascade's Heritage, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think is just a sock yarn. The suggested needle size is 3.25 for the body and 2.75 for the picot and for the peplum. And I honestly hate these quarter needle sizes except for 3.75. This is my favorite needle size, but I honestly don't own 3.25, so I would just check if my gauge would be fine on 3.5 or just 3 millimeters, and perhaps you can do the same, unless you of course have these interchangeable needle sets where these sizes are usually included, or again, you can just check your gauge and go with a more conventional needle size. And in regards to the yarn options, I think this top will look beautiful both in plant-based yarns and something like a mohair or alpaca, for example. There are many beautiful fingering weight yarns out there, so it all depends on whether you want this top to be against your skin or worn as a vest on top of a blouse or something. If I were to knit this, I would definitely go for a lighter yarn, because I think light or like pastel airy yarns would really complement the elegancy and just this detail heavy design. So it's all up to you, but I would not make it in a darker yarn for sure. Next, I briefly want to talk about Camisole No. 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And yes, I know it's a really popular pattern. I'm not like discovering it for you in this video, but its popularity and the fact that it's so beloved is the reason I wanted to mention it, because it's a really nice wardrobe staple. It's a great base layer for outfits. For example, it'll work really well with some of the cardigans I'm going to mention later in the video. And Sézane actually has multiple tops which they sort of re-release every season, which look really similar to Camisole No. 9. Also, in my opinion, this top looks best in a darker yarn, but it's all up to you. If you want to make it in a lighter yarn, I think it still would look fine, but for me, I would knit it in black yarn, basically something similar to the pattern picture. And the recommended yarn is Knitting for Olive Merino or Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. Both are fingering weight yarns, so you can definitely substitute them with something. And the body is knit on 3mm needles. The pattern has a folded collar, which you actually attach on the right side for an extra raised border, but it can be really fiddly, especially if you're not used to a neckline like this. I remember it gave me so much trouble when I was knitting Tee No. 1, which has a similar neckline to this design, also from My Favorite Things knitwear. And a lot of people in general reported that this pattern takes a lot longer than they first expect, just because of the finer gauge and these fiddly finishings you have to do. But once you're done with it, it's so worth it because it's a piece you can wear for a long time. I'm planning to actually cast on one myself really soon. We'll see how it goes. I'm not actually looking forward to knitting it, but I do look forward to having it as a finished object, and I really recommend you try it as well. Next, I want to talk about the Winnie top, which is a new pattern by Lily France. Even though it has been released only in June, it has already become a favorite of many knitters. It's technically a sleeveless top, but it basically has this mock sleeve cap over your shoulders. It looks so elegant and so minimalistic at the same time. The body is knit in stockinette, but it has this beautiful knit lace edging on both the v-neck and on the armholes, at the hem as well, and on the sides you have these mock seams, which are really interesting and add again an extra something to this pattern. And the yarn options are basically limitless. It's knit on 3.75 needles, which is a great needle size for like DK weight yarns and stuff. If you don't hit gauge, you can just go up to 4mm, and it technically recommends Cardiff Kashmir, but if you don't want to like shill a lot of money for Cardiff Kashmir, you can instead go for a merino or a plant-based yarn as well. If you want this top to be worn more like a vest or a slipover, you can go up a size and knit it in a combination of fingering weight yarn plus silk mohair. It should be really nice and warm. For a more summery version, you can again go with a plant-based yarn. For example, I'm currently knitting a t-shirt out of Gepard Garn Horsilke. Even though this yarn is really splitty and I sometimes don't enjoy working with it, the actual fabric it gives me is really beautiful, and I think the gauge and like the weight of this yarn should be fine for this top. And I really like the chestnut color used in the pattern sample. It looks so beautiful and so elegant. Another top I can't help mentioning is the Tulipan Tee by LorienKnits. I did finish knitting it recently and I really enjoyed the process. I'm really bummed out that I don't get to keep the finished object because I really liked how it came out. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I talked about it in a podcast already, and also I'm going to mention it again when I talk about the finished object in an upcoming episode. But I think I'm justified in adding it to this list because it does match the theme pretty well. It's a really simple yet elegant t-shirt. It's kind of minimalistic, but at the same time it's really elevated because of the lace yoke it has. You start knitting it with a circular yoke, and the lace is actually really straightforward. It's a quite quick knit in general, so I would honestly recommend it as your introduction to lace. After you are done with the lace yoke, you do a couple of raglan increases before splitting for body and sleeves, and it's just stockinette from there. It has really short ribbing on both the sleeves and the hem, and the recommended needle size is 4mm needles. The yarn suggested is Sandnes Garn Line, but I knit my version in Drops Bell, and I also think it worked really nicely for this pattern, so I just really recommend it. It was one of my favorite knits this summer. Again, I'm really bummed out I don't get to keep it, so hopefully you can knit one for yourself and do get to keep it. The last t-shirt before we move on to cardigans is the Campanula Tee, which I think is the trendiest pattern out of all of the ones I mentioned, and it's knit in mixed ribbing pattern. It's really straightforward, but it has this really whimsical ruffle edge everywhere, and it just looks so fun. The top has short sleeves, obviously, and a boat neck, and it's knit seamlessly top down with a contiguous sleeve, which currently is my favorite sleeve construction, so I think it's going to be a really straightforward knit. But it is the lightest of all of the ones on the list, with the recommended needle size being 2.5. The recommended yarn is Summer in Kashmir by BC Garn, or you can use Tynn Line, and the top is intended to have a lot of negative ease, so from 15 to 25 centimeters, which makes it really nice and form-fitting. But when you knit the top, you can't really like measure it when it's just flat on your needles. You have to try it on constantly to make sure that it's the right length, so you don't end up with like a really cropped top. And also there is a dress version of the same pattern, so check it out if you want to have a minimalistic and yet still frilly and romantic dress. Next we have the Bon Cardigan, which is a really vintage inspired piece. It's really beautiful and the details on this pattern are just adorable. I would honestly classify it as a button-up blouse rather than a cardigan, but it is technically a cardigan. It has a V-neck and the body is knit with these little eyelets throughout. The button band is knit in ribbing with scalloped edges, but you don't have to do any crochet here. It's fully knitted. Even though this design is really vintage looking and really vintage inspired, it's much easier to knit compared to actual vintage blouses like this because you knit it top down. You don't have to do any seaming up. The sleeves are picked up from the armholes and you do your sleeve cap shaping using short rows. The recommended needle size is 3.5 millimeters and it's intended for sport weight yarn, and I think this pattern will look great in both blend-based yarns and something more woolly, for example light fingering weight wool plus silk mohair. Also, I think that your choice of color can really take this knit from something more vintage and girly, for the lack of a better term, to something more modern and sleek if you use darker yarns, for example. So again, it's up to you. The fit is slightly cropped and it has about 6 centimeters of positive ease, and I really like the fact that the pattern sample includes pictures with different outfits, so with skirts and darker pants and lighter pants, so you can kind of see what you're going for. And for example, the picture where the model is wearing this cardigan with jeans is really different to all the other ones. Like the mood changes immediately, so I just wish more patterns did this. But at the same time, I realized that when you're designing a pattern, it's like the last thing on your mind, but still it's a really nice touch when it does get included. And moving on, I have another kind of vintage inspired pattern for you. It's the Mily Cardigan, and it's a long sleeve v-neck cardigan knit in reverse stockinette with a similar eyelet pattern to the Bon Cardigan. This one is also knit top down and the ease is about 9 to 15 centimeters of positive ease, and it's actually intended for 2 strands of silk mohair held together. And I know that, like, I'm a maniac, for example, and I can wear silk mohair against my skin, so I can technically wear this cardigan as a blouse, but I appreciate that not everybody can do it. Like, it's fine. You don't want to get an allergy or something, so you might want to use a different yarn instead, or just wear it as an actual cardigan over something, for example, over dresses, or even over something like a Camisole No. 9. Also, if you want a more airy version of this cardigan, you can use 1 strand of silk mohair instead. The pattern also suggests you use jeweled buttons, which sounds really, really fun, and I think it'll make this cardigan look even more chic, but I think at the same time something really simple like small shank buttons in a complementary color or pearl buttons, for example, would look really nice with it as well. And I kind of feel the same way about this cardigan as I do about the Yasmeen top, in terms of I don't see it working in a darker yarn. I think it needs something lighter to make the details pop. I think dark or like black yarn would just wash it out and make it look a lot simpler and a lot less like elegant than it actually is. I really debated whether to include this next pattern in our list because it has a lot going against it. It's, first of all, only available in French. It also only comes in one size, one singular size, and it's also only available through a website. You can't purchase it directly through Ravelry. You have to like register on a website, but it's still much easier than getting Sandnes garn patterns, so I decided if I purchase the pattern and can understand the French instructions just by using like Google Translate, then I will include it, but still more like an inspiration than an actual suggestion of what to knit. And look at it. Just look at this pattern. It's so beautiful. This design screams Sézane to me. It has different lace motifs arranged in this chevron pattern, and I just love everything about this design, and I'm so bummed out that it's only available in one size. It is actually fully charted, and I was able to understand the instructions pretty well from the translation I did just, you know, by pointing my camera at the screen. And I think it is possible technically to extend it for other sizes, but you have to be like really dedicated and an advanced knitter to do that, at least in my opinion. Maybe it's easier than I imagine. So every single like lace stitch you have to do is charted. It has a full chart for sleeves and both for the front and the back. And it is seamed and knit bottom up. It is technically both a cardigan and a sweater because you can wear the button band at the back and have like a higher neckline at the front, or you can wear it as a regular v-neck cardigan. This pattern doesn't seem that complicated when you break it down. The individual lace motifs you have to knit are not that complicated. Maybe like bobbles are kind of time consuming, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. And it's knit on 3mm needles with the intended yarn being sport weight. It makes me really sad that it only comes in one size, because it's one of the most beautiful pieces of knitwear I've ever seen, and I really wish that more people can knit it. I guess you can up your needle size to the one suggested in the pattern, but I think it might lead to issues with gauge because everything is fully charted. Alternatively, you can self-draft something similar with maybe a different set of lace motifs, or maybe if you know of a similar pattern that has a wider size range, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to see it and maybe recommend it for everyone in a future video. But yeah, kind of mixed feelings about this one. So our last pattern for today, a real palette cleanser, is the Reset Cardi. It's knit entirely in stockinette, but it's such a timeless, elegant and chic design. It's basically less is more if it was in a pattern form. This is a v-neck cardigan knit top down. It has instructions for both a long-sleeved version and a short-sleeved version, and the sleeves and the shoulders are contiguous, so it's all seamless. The long-sleeved version has a gathered cuff, which I would honestly skip. I don't like the look of these like ballooned cuffs, but I think it's easily customizable and modifiable if you need to. The Reset Cardi is designed for sport weight yarn, and the recommended needle size is 3.5. And my favorite feature of this design is the fact that the button band is fully integrated into the body. So when you knit the body, or like the front specifically, you have these sections of vertical ribbing that you knit at the same time as the stockinette section. So you don't have to do any seaming up later, you don't have to pick up stitches, and it's just one extra step out of your like knitting process. But you do have to be careful as to not have your like ribbing section be really loose. You can try and do double knitting instead, but I would maybe take a DPN that is a larger size. Like if you're knitting this on 3.5, perhaps take like 375 and use the DPNs for the double knit section. I hope I'm making sense, but basically your double knitting is usually a lot tighter, especially like row gauge wise. So if you're using a larger needle size just for this section, you might make it a little bit looser. But maybe don't take my advice. Like, I'm not going to be responsible if your cardigan doesn't work out, so maybe just stick to the pattern. I'm really sorry to give you unsolicited advice, but otherwise, I think it's a really great pattern to knit and have as a staple in your wardrobe. It's probably going to be your favorite knit when you're done with it. And I honestly kind of prefer the short-sleeved version. I think it'll look great in a really nice cotton yarn. Or you can play around with color and use, for example, a lace weight yarn and a silk mohair in a different color to get this sort of mild effect, or get a speckled yarn, like lightly speckled yarn, to kind of showcase the beauty of it. And I think that's the end of our list. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and found some inspiration. If you did, please give this video a like and subscribe for more. I also created a Ravelry bundle with every pattern I mentioned, and if you knit any of the patterns in this list, please let me know, or like let us know your feedback. I wish you happy knitting, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.